sponsoring the event, the decision to navigate automation. And with me is Christina Visser. I'll get Christina to introduce herself, her background, why she loves automation and robotics. And go ahead, Christina.
Hi, thanks, Nathan, and thanks for inviting me. So I am the CEO of the Ionic Technology Group, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And one of the many things we do is automation. So our group in Sudbury, where I'm located, we focus on automation for mining and heavy industry. And that's what I assume we're talking about today. And so we have done both repeat products and if you have a problem, we can often help with that too. So I'm a big fan of automation in its time and place, which I'm sure we will be talking about in the next hour.
Okay. Do you focus on the Sudbury, Northern Ontario market, or do you do projects anywhere in the world?
We do projects everywhere in the world. We have automated equipment on every continent except Antarctica. I don't know if we'll ever get that one, but no, just right now in our shop here in Lively, we currently have equipment that is bound for Saskatchewan, for South Africa, and for Mongolia. So now we got a good chunk of the world handled there. So I didn't mention, but Ionic Mechatronics is the one that does automated equipment. Variant Mining Technology specializes in mine chutes and locomotives, and automation plays a part in that too.
Okay. I'd like to start with the reverse question. So it might be a little strange because you're trying to sell automation and look for techniques that work in that environment. But what projects would you not recommend using automation for?
That actually comes up more than you would think. So obviously, I've never done it in this order before. Usually it's about automating first and then when not to. But when not to is really when it's maybe infrequent and safe and easy, but also when there's too much variation. So to give you an example, automation loves doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's easy to do. It's not that expensive to do. And we can accommodate variation. If we know up front, hey, this could be this wide or it could be this wide, or it might be thicker, or it might, we need to do these two different parts on the same machine, we can work with that. What can be a lot tougher to do, more expensive, more technically difficult, is when you have a much wider variation where you don't know what you're going to get, and it's going to be different every time. So one example I have is, so recently we've done a couple different projects, both with a very similar application. In one case, the consumable materials are very consistent, and that was pretty easy. In the other case, the consumable materials are widely varying, and it's been a struggle, and honestly, more expensive, more difficult. I have an example for you. So I've got a standard highlighter here, right? Mm-hmm. You and I, we can easily, it doesn't matter where the lid is and where the main body of the highlighter is, we can just put them together, you move it around, we can do it every time. A robot would be delighted to do this over and over. Actually, I'm having a harder time with over and over again, because I'm one of those people, right? We have our strengths and our flaws. Our strength as people is we can do, widely varying tasks Where robots are really strong is doing the same thing over and over and over again. So what we will do in a case, there are times when we say, no, it's just not practical to automate this. There won't be any payback. There's no real benefit. Sometimes we say, yes, this is a perfect application. And sometimes we say, okay, no problem with this, and this. But this part we should talk about because you may choose to automate it and you may choose to keep this section manual.
That's a good example. I'm a visual learner myself, so thanks for that. So if you think of the applications where it can be used, I guess safety would be one of them, and cost could be another. And recently I heard you mention the labor shortage in the industry. So, what kind of projects have you worked on, and what are usually the drivers? Is it always safety? Is it other considerations?
I would say it's a combination, and it's almost always a combination. So part of it is production. One of the advantages of robots is they can work all night and they never complain. They don't need time off. But they also, it's useful in cases where you've got a shortage of labor, when you've got, when it's more efficient, right? A lot of times that we get involved, it's because of repetitive strain injuries, or, hope I can pronounce this, musculoskeletal disorders. If I got that wrong, that's okay. So, for example, one of the things that we automated, our very first big machine, first robotic copper stripping system in the world. Now, we do them robotic and not robotic, depending on the preference of the individual client. So I know I'm talking about robots, but not all automation is robots. But basically, you have back-breaking work in a tough environment. And so by automating it, you can take care of that repetitive, difficult, heavy work, and have a person maybe, dealing with faults once in a while, instead of wielding a crowbar hour after hour after hour. Right. So that's a great example. Another that has been a repeat product for us was uranium drumming. So it started out as a question of, how do we handle this dust? Right? Yellow cake has a dust that's very fluid. It's easy to become entrained in the air. And our system, developed years ago, which we thought was a one-off, basically avoids making the dust in the first place. Right? So basically making sure that it doesn't drop very far, and lifting as it fills. So there we're reducing dust, but we're also protecting people from putting on PPE and being in contact with hazardous material. Another one that we've been working on lately is some underground mining tools. So these are, I know most of us, when we think tools, we think of, hammer and this is my pretend hammer. It's not very good. But these are very large tools with very large cylinders and very large handlers for large underground mining equipment. And this is really to protect people so that they can do what they need to do safely out of harm's way.
Right.
And so that's a reasonably new line for us, and I think there will be more of it.
I should mention to the audience that Taylor is working behind the scenes, Taylor from PACE. So if there are any questions, put it in the chat, and she can break in or flag us if anything's coming in there. I remember my first job was with Falconbridge Nickel, and we went to the Falcondo plant in Dominican Republic. And what they did there is the final product, I think it was a 1,000 kilogram bag of cones of ferronickel. And I was watching them, and it would fill up automatically. And if it was like 1,005 kilos, somebody would come running and pull out a cone. And if it was like 997, someone would come running and throw in a cone. And then, I asked them the question, like, couldn't this be automated? And their answer was, yeah, it could be automated. But, really the social license is to have people working at the plant. So, it might have been a low skilled job, but it generated, jobs 24 hours, people running and weighing the bags and putting in, removing cones. So, it was a job where it could have been automated, but, it just wasn't. So, and then, more recently I was thinking, well, if you have automation, you might be removing jobs from the plant, but you would still need other maybe higher skill jobs like IT or robotic engineers, or people to troubleshoot the automation, the robots. So this must be something you think about all the time.
Well, I have to agree with you on both of those, Nathan. We do reasonably frequently have customers who want to automate this because it's hard, because it's dangerous, because it's heavy, but they still want to have people involved. And whether it's due to agreements, whether it's because you need to have people around anyway to do these things and to give them something useful to do in the meantime. Yeah, so that does happen. We want to automate the big scary part, but keep the easier part, that yeah, we could automate, but we'd rather have a person doing that, and that's not a problem. As far as the more skilled labor that you need, there is some truth to that. We try very hard to make sure that the interlocks, the alarms, the notifications, etc., make things as easy as possible, right? So the machine doesn't stop and you have no idea why. That's the worst situation. Now you're looking at this big, scary piece of equipment and you have no idea where to start. What we like to do is to be able to tell you exactly what's going on. Hey, this is the problem area. Go take a look at this. I don't know. I need oil. I need whatever. I'm out of bolts. I'm out of whatever you need. So we try to make it as user-friendly as possible. We do train people before we leave site. And depending on the owner preference, we maintain the ability to provide service, troubleshooting, etc., remotely. So we can often log in to this system safely. There we have ways of doing that, so that we can help troubleshoot from afar, rather than sending somebody on a plane across the world. We'll do that. We do that, but you don't want to be doing that every time.
So where's it going to go in 10 years? Are we going to have robots running around oiling other robots and giving them the bolts, or still going to need people?
I mean, maybe. That's really not our focus. We're assuming that people are still involved in certain ways, and I honestly don't see that going away anytime soon. The idea plant goes by itself with no one doesn't happen very often.
There's a question that came in from the audience that says, which users in the plant usually initiate the requests for automation, and have you had any resistance to adoption? I think I know the answer to the second one, but who usually contacts you?
Oh, that's a good question, because it comes from different people, right? And it also depends on how it's initiated, right? Sometimes we're there for something else, and hey, and someone's having trouble, and we could automate that. Sometimes people have thought about it and come to us knowing exactly what they want. Sometimes people don't know what's possible and say, hey, we've got a problem. I have no idea if we can fix this, but can you come take a look? Um, so yeah, it really varies from an impromptu conversation to a well thought out, we know exactly what we want. Um, we are actually pretty happy to work with a group to figure out what to do. One of the things that ties in with resistance to adoption is our preference is really to have operators and maintenance people involved from the start or close to the start, right? It's all great to work with project managers and engineers. We do that. We like that. But operators and maintenance people often have more insight into some aspects of equipment and know more about their operation in cases too. So with their input, we learn, we do better, but we also, they're more likely to feel part of it and less likely to resist it when it's implemented, right? A bit of a sense of ownership. Hey, I recommended this be moved. Um, I'm happy to make this work because I had a part in it. So we always encourage that.
Yeah, well, they're looking at it from different points of view. If it's running correctly and you're making production, that's the production engineers, but the maintenance people are the ones that get involved, or well, they're involved the whole way through, but certainly when
Yeah.
things go wrong, so they're different perspective. So it must be frustrating for you, I guess, with your lens, your mind's eye. You're walking through places, you're going to plants, going just down the street, and it's like, oh, that could be automated, and that could be automated, and then you talk to people, it's like, nah, we're happy the way it is. And
I know of a case. So we have a product called SafeBox that does um, group. It does a few things. It's helpful for long conveyors. It's also helpful to lock out a whole group of equipment at the same time.
Mhm.
So, when you go and lock out and tag out 15 different things, our SafeBox can do that with the push of a button. And once everything is safe, a lever releases and you put your lock in, right?
Okay.
Easy peasy. Um, is one of those rare safety initiatives that actually also saves time. So it makes it easier for people, um, and it makes it safer, and it's got a payback. It's pretty awesome. So I know of a situation that I will not name where I feel like the payback is in the range of hours and no interest. So I hope that changes someday. Keeping my fingers crossed, but you can't force anyone to do anything. They have to want to. And the good thing is more and more people want to.
Well, you mentioned the ROI payback before, and you just brought it up again. So do you help build the business case? I mean, sometimes it's more of a safety concern, or
Yeah.
lifting heavy objects and so forth. But is that something you work with the client to show them the payback, or work with them to convince their senior people what the payback could be?
Sometimes, absolutely sometimes, but I will say that usually ROI is not the driving factor. Sometimes, yes, it is to improve production, and so that's absolutely a factor. More often, I'd say it's more about safety and avoiding injuries and exposure to the various dangers of the workplace.
You also mentioned before that sometimes people just don't know what's available, the art of the possible. So it is part of the job going to conferences, mining conferences, and just showing people examples of what is out there and what is available. And do you hear that? It's like, oh, I had no idea. It's like, you've seen it before, but maybe the mining people haven't.
Absolutely. I mean, we're definitely doing that with SafeBox. With the other equipment, yes, but of course you can't bring a great big automated system to show people, right? So it's more about pictures and meeting the people who have these needs, who have these problems, right? Like we have done, I've been giving mining examples, but so many of our projects um, come from someone saying, "Hey, I've got a problem. Is there a way to fix this? Can we automate this? Can we make this easier?" Um, and really it varies. Definitely, the tank house was our starting point in many ways. But we've done work in steel. We've done work, mining plants, steel, pulp and paper, etc., etc. Um, because this is a factor for so many people, and yeah, they don't know what's possible, and so we're absolutely willing to come and look at something and say yes, yes, this is what you can do, or as I said right at the beginning, no, this probably isn't worthwhile. No, you do this once a year and it's pretty easy. Why would you automate that?
Well, the tank house is a good one because it's hot. You got acid mist. The edges of the sheets are very sharp. So you have a lot of reasons why you'd want to keep a human being away from a lot of that equipment. So I could see that one for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, it absolutely. It's a tough environment, and we don't apply all technology everywhere, right? When you're in an acid environment, we got to take that into account for all our materials,
Right.
right? I think I mentioned we did the first robotic CSM in the world. Well, you know, we weren't an early adopter of robotics there, but we had to wait for robotics to become um, rugged, durable, and to have the capacity. And by capacity, I mean just able to lift something. We're not using the little teeny tiny robots. We're using the big ones, and it's a challenge. Now, I gotta say, not many people will appreciate this, but you get a couple robots in the CSM and they're doing their thing. I think it's like dancing. I could just watch them all day. Uh,
Yeah, that's funny. I could watch hot metal being poured all day as
oh,
well.
me too. Yeah, hot metal, and robots dancing. Um,
Yeah, that might be something you should bring up to the National Ballet School. I wonder what they would think.
I doubt they'll be interested. And um, once once years ago, and I'm not going to say where we did this, and it wasn't in mining. We had a project that was more of it really didn't have a good case for automation because it was fairly easy, low hazard, but it was sort of I don't want to, I'm going to call it a vanity project. I don't think that's entirely fair either because it was useful. But I believe the robot programming had a few little flourishes, right? Normally, we're aiming for efficiency all the time, right? You want to get it there in the smoothest, fastest, easy way possible. I think that one, it was a little bit more of a swoop to make it look cool.
That was
Once,
on your
only
side or
once.
the customer side?
That was what the customer wanted.
Uh, that's interesting. I, I'm thinking as you're talking that it must be very situational. Like I'm thinking if you're looking at self-driving trucks, automated trucks, mining trucks as an example. Like if you're
Yeah.
in Australia and you have a fly in, fly out operation, and you got to pay the driver hundred and something $1,000, and you got to fly them and feed them and clothe them and house them. You're probably paying like over $200,000 for a driver. But if you're in, let's say, Mexico, where the local community relies on the truck drivers, and a lot of them are women, because it is something they train the local community to be, and they're not getting paid more than several pesos a day. It makes no sense to automate the truck. It would never pay for itself. And those two situations are very different. And I'm sure there's lots of things in the middle. So it would be the ROI would be very different in Australia versus in the middle of nowhere, Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's situation is different. If you are in a remote area, as many mines are, and there's a shortage of labor, a shortage of skilled labor, then automation is a lot more appealing than when you're in an area where it's fairly safe, fairly clean, and there are lots of people who need work, right? So, and that comes back to what we talked about before. Sometimes you automate part of it. Sometimes you say, hey, this part is big, scary. We don't want people hurting themselves. Let's get a machine to do that. Let's get a machine to pick this up, to strip that, to load that, to drum, to package, to put it in bags. All of these things, right, that are we come across all the time, and we do all the time. One example I have is where we've done a packaging system, a drumming system of a hazardous material, and we've done automated labeling before. But you know what? No, we'd like to keep the labeling manual, and we have no problem with that. We'll make sure that there's a nice, safe, accessible station for a person to get in there.
Mhm.
And so honestly, I think every situation you have to look at. You have to look at what needs to be done, but you also need to look at the whole situation surrounding it, right? Where are you located? What type of labor is available? What makes sense for this community? And yeah, so we recognize that these situations can be complicated, and we're going to work with people. And as I said before, we're always happy to automate, and we're always happy to say, you know what, why don't you just make this task easier by doing X and Y and Z, and don't attempt full automation. Yeah.
There was a question, maybe you used it, CSM, and someone in the audience
Oh,
is asking to clarify.
sorry, copper stripping system. There's also APM, which is anode prep machine. Um, Apologies.
So CSM is copper strip machine?
Copper stripping machine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was another one that came in as well. How would you go about deciding on potential for automation for a greenfield operation? Oh, that's an interesting one. Because usually if you're walking around a brownfield one, you can see how things are being done.
Yeah, and honestly, we've done both, and that comes down to all sorts of questions. The same ones we've talked about already, about what do you have for a labor force? What are the risks? What can be done safely, easily? How back to the marker? How consistent is it? So these all come into play, and yeah, that needs to be considered at every step of the way, right? So we've done mine locomotives that run back and forth, that are that are automated. It really comes down to what makes sense in this situation. I am in favor of it because there are decisions you can make ahead of time that can make things easier across the board. So, for example, underground, if you want to run on a Wi-Fi system, you want to do things that don't mess up your Wi-Fi, that give you good, consistent signals and processing. If you are planning to automate, you want to make sure you have room for the machines, room for all the things that go with it, right? You want to have room for um, know how you're going to handle any rejects, right? Because that can happen. Not I'm thinking of a CSM right now, right? You strip a cathode after cathode after cathode, and then you get one that's messed up in some way. And we were just talking about that today, right? You try it, you try it, you try it, you try it, try something else, and then you say, nope, can't get this one, right? So that happens too, and that should be considered honestly greenfield or brownfield.
I guess would also depend, like if you're talking about an environment like a tank house, you can go visit lots of tank houses around the world and see how they do it and what could be automated. Or if you're going to, a concentrator or a mill versus like the first time application of something that somebody might come to with, like, it's like, okay, I know what a concentrator looks like and I can see what's labor intensive, like adding the balls to the mill, or something that I have no idea. No one's ever done it before.
Yeah.
What would Christina recommend?
Yeah, and I think it really takes looking at the process and saying, you know what, this is what makes sense here, right? Adding balls to a mill, for example, I don't think we've ever done that one. But right off the top of my head, I can think of, how do you manage the balls? How do you add them? You don't want somebody putting them in their pockets and chucking them in. You always need to think of the system of how do we do this? How do we do this safely? And make sure everybody goes home at night. So, automation to me can mean the whole system, but it can mean just putting tools in place to make things easier for people. And yeah, it can be hard. I know we've done systems that are very simple. We've also done ones where other people have failed, and we've come in and really tried to make it rugged and durable and have succeeded. So greenfield, brownfield, a lot of the challenges are the same. Greenfield is nice because we don't have to shoehorn it in. We have definitely done some shoehorning in our days.
Yeah, well, like I have a background in Six Sigma, and usually the philosophy is like, whatever you're doing, there's probably a better way to do it. Don't assume that just because you've been doing it for 20 years that it's totally optimized and they found all the shortcuts. So if you go in with that mindset, take a look at what they're doing and there's a way to improve it. Maybe automation isn't
Right.
the cheapest way or the best way to do it, but whatever you're doing, have someone else take a look. There's probably a more optimum way.
Yeah. Well, whether you're doing something manually or whether you're doing it automatically, you still want to think about efficiency, right? You still want to reduce handling, keep people as safe as possible, and be as direct as possible, right? If at its extreme, you don't do one regular action at one end of the plant, then go to the other end of the plant, and then back to the first end, 5 times with every part. You want to do what you need to do over here, and then do what you need to do over there, or better yet, do them both together.
I think about regulation and safety, but more on the regulation side. have you come across instances where it's like, no, this is the way it has to be done because that's the regulation? It would take a lot to convince the regulators that this is a better way to do it. Do you come across those kind of issues?
Once in a while. I mean, we have a lot of engineers, designers on staff, a lot of CMSEs, so certified machinery safety experts. And we follow standards. So we follow CSA standards, ISO standards, a few that we follow all the time, and then a bunch that we follow, when they're applicable. And so that is always a factor. I've forgotten the question. Oh dear.
But just if the regulators ever, come in and say,
Oh.
we know how this works, in the framework of the regulation, and you want to try some. Let me give you an example. Like for 43101 reports, if you want to do drilling, there's whole chapters on, how the samples are taken, how they go to the lab, how the lab has to have standards, how the lab has to have blanks. So there's a whole industry around drilling for exploration. And if somebody came in with something that was not drilling, I don't even know how you would get it into a 43101 report, because the de facto way to tell me how much gold or nickel I have in the ground is drilling.
Right.
So, the regulators, like if you had something better than drilling, I'm not sure how you would convince the regulators to even use it to tell me how much gold you think there's in the ground.
So we have done that before. And the example that probably the most salient example is SafeBox, right? Everybody has locking and tagging procedures. Obviously, isolation is a huge legal safety requirement. There's no debate about that, right? You got to lock and tag, right? And when you bring in SafeBox, which is the app, so where it originated was saying, wouldn't it be nice if we could use the machine safety principles that we use everywhere else and use them for SafeBox? Right. So when you go to turn off an automated machine, right, a group of equipment, you press a stop button and you stop the whole system and you lock out the whole system. And you open the safety gate and nothing can start. So we took that and developed SafeBox, saying, hey, this will work for a group of equipment or a long conveyor, which honestly wasn't on the radar at the time, but certainly is now. But we realized, hey, we got to make sure that the ministry is on board with this. We got to make sure that safety groups are on board with this, because this is a change, right? This is not the way people are used to doing things. We know it's safe. We know it's safe because it's perfectly allowable over here. Okay, so we're not really doing anything new, anything unsafe. And to be clear, this isn't an interlock. This is an actual disconnect in the power to the equipment and confirming, all safety rated devices and confirming that there's no power, no motion, no energy there. Okay, so we know it's safe, but we still need to make sure that it's accepted and safe. And so that was a years-long process of going through that, getting approval, getting acceptance. And once you've got that acceptance, it's so much easier to do the next jurisdiction, right? Hey, Ontario's okay with it. Hey, BC's okay with it. Hey, I don't know if we've done one in Quebec, but all these jurisdictions are fine with it. So it's a lot easier to do the third, fourth, fifth. And yeah, we had to prove that this was safe and prove why it was safe.
Was this the safety people at the company or more the provincial regulator?
Both, right? Because the first question the safety people at the company have, back in the day was, well, is the Ministry of Labor okay with this? Are we
Yeah.
going to get in trouble for this? Because the Green Book says we need to lock and tag, and
Yeah.
we're going to lock and tag. So
Well,
then we
there's
had to prove that this was an acceptable way to lock and tag, right? It's not an alternative, it's a method.
Yeah, that was kind of the point with the drilling. So there were two questions that came in, but one of them actually is about SafeBox. So I'll ask you the second question first. So what's the rate of adoption of SafeBox by country? Which countries or regions have adopted it at the most, and which ones the least? So I guess, are there jurisdictions that are more open to trying things? Have you found anything in that area?
Well, we have systems in Canada and in Chile. We have interest in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. I'm gonna miss a few. We've got a lot of interest internationally. So I think I'll have a different answer to this a year from now, right? I think we've got multiple systems working successfully, and I think this is going to really, really take off.
Well, there's that old joke in mining: everybody wants to be first to be second, and now I'm starting to say everybody wants to be first to be third. I guess you see this as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody wants to see, well, where else do you have it? And I mean, we want to point to, well, all this automated equipment is using the same technology, but it's not the SafeBox. So we had the first, we've had the second, we've had the third, we've had the fourth, we've had the fifth, so and so on, and so it should be okay now for everybody.
So I guess my question, and I like asking this to other people, is like, why mining? Like, ketchup factories have conveyor belts. Like, why is it easier to sell it to ketchup factories than miners? Or why do you like mining so much, besides that you're based in Sudbury?
Are we talking SafeBox or automation in general?
Well, I was thinking SafeBox, but in general.
Okay. So SafeBox, we do have interest outside of mining. Mining is a good application for a couple of reasons. Like, partly, so when we started Ionic 25 years ago, this was my late husband and I came to Sudbury, his hometown, and we were going to try Sudbury for a year. And that was quite some time ago. And he saw opportunity. He had worked in automation in Southern Ontario, and this is what he really wanted to do. And we were both systems design engineers. We met at the University of Waterloo. And so this was a particular interest of his. And it was right up my alley too. So we decided to give it a try because we saw opportunity. He started in automotive.
Mhm.
Automotive is very competitive, and it was a lot more established there. In mining ran behind automotive in terms of automation, and so we were really a pioneer, right? And still are, right? A lot of the things we do are the first to do them. Now, a lot of those firsts have become repeat products over the years, usually with variations. Who am I kidding? Almost always with variations. Um, but yeah, just see a need. And I think we're still seeing a flow from the refining plants down to the mines, right? Automation tends to shift that way. And I think we're seeing more automation in mines these days. And I think that trend will continue.
There was
So opportunity. In one word, opportunity.
one question that came in. You might have touched on it before, but I'll read it to you anyway. So, what's your recommendation to mining project teams who are operating in skilled resource challenged environments? what's the first step they can take, and at what point in the project is the best time to decide on automation or to bring you into the project?
Okay. So I think if you're in a skilled resource challenged environment, you should definitely be thinking automation. Um, right? It doesn't remove the need for people, but it reduces the need for people. And, back to what I've said, you can avoid the more dangerous activities. So the first step to take, am I allowed to be completely biased here, Nathan?
You can.
So,
I
so
asked your opinion.
okay, so the first step is to call Ionic, um, and um, and we'll look at it with you, right? We'll say, hey, this makes sense. This doesn't. We can help with this, and also, hey, this isn't what we do, but we know you should talk to these guys, right? Because they can help you with that, right? We do a lot of things. We don't do everything, and so yeah, honestly, I would say talk early. We often get involved in concept studies or pre-feasibility and look at what can be done and what could be done. So the earlier the better,
Mhm.
but at the same time, sometimes it's brownfield after the fact, and that's okay too.
I was thinking of another thing that's different about mining. Like sometimes you're at a gold mine and the life of mine might be 7 years. Other times it might be 30 years, or Sudbury where, Falconbridge started in 1928. So you're going like century. So, that might change the way you're looking at the project as well, right? But a
Mhm.
7-year mine life, ends up being 20 by the time it's done. You just don't know that going in. So
Yeah, and sometimes that comes down to, hey, this is your decision. This is what we can do. This is what we would do for 20 plus years. This is what we could do. Well, obviously you can do the same thing for 7 as 20 plus. You might design things a little lighter, but you might also just do less, right? Or you might say, hey, you can resell this, you can reuse this, to someone else. So it really comes down to the decision. But yeah, if you're going to shut down in 6 months, you
right.
probably should limp along until the 6 months are up.
So I've asked you a lot of questions, and the audience has as well. Is there anything that you want to mention that we didn't cover, or any, really special robots with flair? That could be your new tagline. We design robots with flair.
Well, we normally design robots for efficiency, right? But one of the things you do want is a nice. So we start by training robots slowly, right? So you just go from here to there to there, and then you try to speed it up and make sure that you've got the most efficient path, right? You don't ever want to drop anything. You don't ever want to bump into things. So you make sure you do everything safely, step by step by step. There are all sorts of built-in features to prevent collisions, um, as well as the programming and training that we do. Uh, but you really start slowly and build from there.
And I know we didn't talk about drones, but as you were talking, I was talking to someone at U of T, and they had a drone application, and they sent defibrillators from Toronto hospitals to downtown buildings, in case of a heart attack, and the
Yeah,
drone always beat the ambulance because of the traffic. There's
right.
issues with drones in downtown Toronto, but that wasn't really the point. So it's like people were thinking, oh, I'm only 10 blocks away from the ambulance, but the drone consistently beat a human being. and people never thought of that application. You probably don't hear too much about it. So are there any, like, really your favorite example of a project? I know you probably don't want to pick one minor over another, but anything that really stands out in your mind? I'm really glad we did this project.
I have lots of favorites, but I think one of our uh, greatest initiatives of all time was probably coming up with a way to drum uranium without creating the dust in the first place, right? Because everybody else had drummed it the same way they drummed anything else. And most dust isn't particularly concerning, right? A little bit of dust from this or that, a little bit of sand, who cares?
Mhm.
A little bit of uranium is a bit of a bigger deal. And so instead of trying to do the same thing again, we did something entirely different, right? I mean, it still ends up the same with uranium in a drum, but it was just by taking that second look, similar with SafeBox 2, right? Just, hey, we don't have to do things the same. It would probably work with your drilling. So we're not usually talking massive changes, right? I don't believe in reinventing the wheel all the time, but sometimes taking a step back and saying, okay, I know everybody does it this way, but is there a better way? And is it practical? Practical? Is it durable? Is it robust? Is it really going to work, right? Because coming up with pie in the sky ideas doesn't help anybody and needs to be practical, durable, reliable. So yeah, I'm really proud of that one. Really proud of some of the ones where other people failed and we succeeded. Really proud of some of our firsts. And we're doing things right now that we've never done before. And I'm really excited to see them. They're coming together in our shop right now. And they're bigger than we've normally worked with. Like, we normally deal with big. When I go to our Cambridge shop, which does more medical, pharmaceutical, and automotive automation,
Mhm.
I love watching that too, right? Because it's small, it's fast, it's compared to what we have here, it's delicate, it's pretty. Here, everything is big, heavy, rugged, durable, and I love it. It's just wonderful to be able to make these things work on heavy equipment. So here we're going one step heavier yet again. Attachments for a scoop tram to do some mining activities, and that's exciting too. It's a new branch, and no, I think there will be more of this.
I remember you told me, sometimes things seem simple but don't end up that way. Like putting a lid on a drum, like the lids could be a little bent, or the bolt might not fit exactly, or the drum is a little dented. Whereas a person, kind of could figure out what to do. But if it's repetitive, but it's not exactly the same. So, I remember you saying, besides the dust issue, just the fact of putting a simple lid on a drum, could have ended up being a bigger challenge than you thought about.
Yeah, some things are harder than we think they're going to be, right? And that often comes down to variation, more complex situations, more variability, maybe inconsistent consumable parts. There's a whole variety of things that we recognize a lot of these issues ahead of time, but we can't always see everything ahead of time. We do our best. My phone is ringing. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I hope you
there's some
can see
beeping
that.
on this side here. No, we're almost out of time anyway. So, Taylor, I guess you can put your contact information in the chat room. But a lot of people see these videos after the fact as well. So, how do people get in touch with you? I guess like I think I'm the only one with my name on LinkedIn, so I'm usually easy to find. What about yourself? What's the best way to track you down? And another question: are a lot of these projects confidential, or if somebody wanted to go to Lively and see what you're working on or talk to you, is that possible as well?
We do have a lot of confidentiality comes into play, but we can share what we can share, right? And we won't share what we can't share. Certainly, we've done a whole number of systems. Most of a lot of the IP is ours. Some of it isn't, and we're always sensitive to those considerations. So I can be found on LinkedIn. We also have websites for the various businesses, including for the Ionic Technology Group.
Okay, I see Taylor put your
Yeah.
your contact in the chat. Do people work as a group? Like if 2 or 3 mining company, have a consortia or kind of challenge that they want you to look at it, or is it usually just one company that reaches out to you?
It's usually one company, but we would be open to working with the group, right? If 3 companies have the same problem, we're happy to talk to them together as well. Individual, it often comes down to a visit, a concept study, just to make sure that everything is feasible and to get an idea of the cost, right? We don't want to do a ton of work only to discover that that's way too much.
Mm-hmm.
We want to work with you and figure out what would meet your needs, and your needs, both your technical needs, your safety needs, and your financial needs.
Okay.
Right.
So from my side, I'd like to thank Taylor working in the background. I'd like to thank Pace for sponsoring the webinar. I'd like to thank the audience for tuning in, and for those who are going to tune in after the fact. And of course to you, Christina, for your time. I found it very enlightening, and I learned a lot. I'll leave it with you if you want to say anything to the audience before we wrap it up.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And as for the audience, I mean, there's so much that can be done to improve the workroom environment, to make jobs easier, that don't necessarily involve full automation, although full automation is cool too. Give us a call.